Once again, we're on the trail of the Nephilim. And when we're on the trail of the Nephilim, who always shows up? Well, L.A. Marzulli. Hi, L.A.
Great to be here, Gary. Thank you.
It is good to have you. And I want to get right into a discussion today of your latest DVD. And this is episode 2. L.A. Marzulli presents On the Trail of the Nephilim. But here's the real kicker. Mathematical Mysteries of the Moundbuilders. Who were the Moundbuilders and what are the mathematical mysteries?
That's a loaded question, and you said it. This is episode 2. Just for the viewers, episode 3 is being edited as we speak.
Aha.
And 4, 5, 6, 7. This is an ongoing series. There's so much information. The Moundbuilders are very mysterious, and no one really knows who they were. And modern day archaeologists will look at these mounds and they'll say, well, they'll call them the Hopewell or the Adena. These are names that they just literally pull out of a hat. Hopewell was a farmer, and he found some artifacts on his property, and so they took that and they named this whole culture that surrounded and made these artifacts the Hopewell. They have no idea who these people were, where they came from, or, which is incredibly mysterious, what happened to them. And as we talk about in the first film, some of these mounds, like Poverty Point, has 390,000 tons of earth. There are 10,000 mounds alone in Ohio. 390,000 tons of earth, and we show this in the film. It's basically 28 million single buckets of earth to create Poverty Point. How was the dirt compacted? And so we're looking at a mystery here, and the overarching theme is on the trail of a Nephilim. So is it possible that 3,500 years ago, when Joshua and Caleb pressed into the Levant, the Promised Land, we know that there were Nephilim tribes that were there. The Rephaim, the Nephilim, the Anakim, the Zanzumim, the Emims, to name a few. Is it possible that there was a diaspora? That's our overarching hypothesis. We say yes, there was a diaspora, and they came over. And even before that, they began the copper trade, which is another episode which we're going to talk about in future part of the series. Tons of copper has gone missing out of the Great Lakes, and no one knows where it's gone. Native Americans didn't work with copper. So this thing is incredibly enigmatic. It points back to the biblical narrative that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards.
Now, in your first DVD, The Mysterious Moundbuilders, you build a case for the fact that primitives did not build the mounds. Mm-hmm. They couldn't have, using very simple tools, non-metallic tools, by the way, fashioned from the things they found in nature, because these mountains of dirt are not only huge, but they're steep. And in your second DVD called Mathematical Mysteries of the Moundbuilders, you take it a step further and demonstrate how ordinary primitives could not build a mound that big with walls that steep. Mm-hmm. Because, there are simple mechanical reasons why the dirt would just simply fall down into a lower mound. So how did they compact that thing?
And we don't know. And what we're trying to do for a future episode is actually hiring a soils engineer and going into the mound and doing a compaction study. To the best of my knowledge, no one has done that yet.
Aha. That's really interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah. Now, what LA is doing here is nothing short of revolutionary, in my opinion. He's talking about the mysterious moundbuilders. And you go to Newark, Ohio, and I've been there, and I've stood up on the viewing platform and walked down through the channels a little bit. And you stand there and you say, primitives, something's wrong here. Primitives could not have built this thing. If I had a crew of people and a bunch of Caterpillar tractors, it would take me years to build those artifacts. But then I'd have to get them right mathematically. And this is the thing that you begin to demonstrate in Mathematical Mysteries of the Moundbuilders. There is some complex stuff going on.
Absolutely. The first film showed that a man with a hoe a primitive stone tool, a hoe. It would take 28 million buckets to build poverty points, single man buckets, which is, you start to deconstruct some of the mounds like Fort Ancient, which is an unbelievable place where we toured. And if you deconstruct that, you've got 200 miles of dump trucks end to end. So when you start putting it like that, you say to yourself, where are the resources? Who's feeding these people? How did they move the dirt? And some of the dirt, let's go back to Newark, Ohio, was actually moved about a mile away. So now it becomes more complex. We hired a surveyor. There's a mound complex there called the Newark Earthworks. And in that, there's what they call the Great Circle Mound. It's over 1,200 feet in diameter. The inside of it has a moat. That moat goes down, in some places, 6, 7, 8 feet. It's way down there. So we hired a surveyor. Now, to the best of my knowledge, no one has done this before. We hired a surveyor, and I wanted to know how accurate is the circle, first of all. Second of all, how level is the interior of the moat? So he goes out there, and this is different. Now, this is modernity. This is only several months ago. And he's out there with this little satellite gizmo thing. They're not using steel tapes and transits looking like that. And I know you know about that.
I know about that. Yeah.
Very, very much so. He's out there with satellite stuff, and they're measuring this thing, and he goes, wow. He was blown away. It's within 6 inches to a foot of being dead level.
And on the DVD, he as much as says it would be hard for me to do this.
Exactly.
And I've got some hyper sophisticated
equipment.
Yeah.
So now we know that the interior of the moat is level with 6 inches to a foot.
Right.
And it begs the question: how do you do this in antiquity? How do you level something like this when you can use water, and the engineer Todd Willis says that, but the water source is way over here. How do you bring the water into the moat? And then you dig a little 10-foot section and see how the water settles, and then drain that and try. I mean, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. And what even to me is more astounding, and Chief Joseph weighs in on this, and he is, you can see the fire in his eyes, because he basically states on the record that Native Americans did not build the Great Circle Mound or the Octagon Mound,
Right.
or the Great Serpent Mound. And there's a false narrative that's being put forward.
Right.
And this is where it gets into the whole cover-up and the academic conspiracy that leads, in my opinion, back to the Smithsonian.
Now, I want to talk about that in just a minute, but before we do, let's go just a little bit further for people who really are not familiar with the mounds in Newark, Ohio, or the Peebles, Ohio Serpent on the ground. The constructions, and if you've ever been there, and I was fortunate enough to stand in the works there at Newark, Ohio, the thing that struck me, and I went down to the bottom of the ditch,
the moat,
right, that has a circumference of how
1,200 feet.
1,200 feet. I'm standing in the bottom of this.
That's the diameter, right?
Yeah, the diameter, and I'm standing in the bottom of this wonderfully crafted.
It's perfect.
Perfect. And I'm
unbelievable.
Looking up at the edge where they've carefully channeled the dirt up and built a raised edge around this whole thing that looks like it was done by some sort of machinery. And I'm saying to myself, how in the world could anyone ever say that this was crafted by primitive people with no scientific knowledge? And then let's get into the scientific knowledge, because all these things are aligned with the sun, moon, and stars. And this is amazing to me.
The entire complex is built on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar calendar, lunar cycle. And this is very problematic, because in order to do that, someone has to watch the moon for 18-and-a-half years and then record that so they can align everything on the basis of an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. How do you record something if you have no writing tools?
Right.
And so the whole construct begins to just crumble of its own weight. It doesn't work, and yet it's regurgitated. This is what archaeologists believe, and no matter how much evidence, like even the moat itself, when you say, how would they do that? And you're right, the sides of the moat are crafted so perfectly that it's mind-boggling. The gateway at Fort Ancient, for instance, we were there on the spring equinox, and it was astounding. My wife has a cell phone, and we pointed, it was due east, and the hydra, the serpent was coming up over that gate. It is absolutely deliberate. The Serpent Mound in Peebles, Ohio, which you mentioned, where the mouth is agape like this, and in my opinion, that serpent is in the act of swallowing, destroying the egg. And this hails back to Genesis 3:15.
Right.
Seed of the serpent will be at war with the offspring of the seed of the woman. He, the Messiah, will crush your head. And this is this huge serpent, which you can only see from the air, by the way,
Yes.
is in the act of swallowing an egg. Basically, it's saying, no, we're gonna defeat you. The serpent's going to defeat you. The serpent will destroy the egg. And of course, we know that Yeshua, Jesus, came about 2,000 years ago and crushed the head of the serpent.
You bring up an interesting point, namely that the people who built these things were not pro-Messiah. They
Not
were
at
not
all.
pro-Abraham, Isaac,
Not
and
at
Jacob.
all. Anti.
They were on the other side of the spiritual wall, and that becomes super clear. In fact, probably someone is sitting out there saying, what does all this have to do with the Bible? I'm going to open my Bible to Genesis 14, where it talks about Abraham rescuing Lot. In the 14th year of Kedorlaomer, the kings that were with him and smote the Rephaim in Ashtoreth Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Amims in Shaveh Kiriathaim. And so there are 3 giant tribes mentioned, bang, 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 in a row. And folks, if you haven't followed the trail of the Nephilim in the Bible, you have missed a huge story.
Because everything hails back to Genesis 3:15. There's a seed war. You talked about this at one of the Nephilim Mounds conference, and that was that impacted a lot of people. It's all about the seed was the title of your presentation. It was incredible because you just outlined, really, if we don't understand Genesis 3:15, when we come to Genesis 6, or the Tower of Babel, or Abraham and the kings, or the conquest of Canaan, or Sodom and Gomorrah, we have no idea what the Bible is talking about.
Now, these Rephaim or Nephilim, and we could talk about the differences later, it's not necessary to make that distinction right now, but they were not humans.
No.
They were some crossbreed.
It's a mixture, a hybrid race.
A hybrid race of giants. And when we're talking giants, we're not talking about basketball players. We're talking about 15 feet tall and maybe taller.
Maybe taller. You know, you talk about that, and on Catalina Island, and we cut back to this in the films. We show what we discovered on Catalina Island, that 9-footer, which you were instrumental in showing how to deconstruct that and putting it next to Ralph Glidden, the primitive archaeologist who was 5 foot 8 inches tall, and the skeleton that he unearthed was just under 9 feet. And that was never supposed to be found, but I found the photo. And then later on, the museum redacted the photo, cut the giant out of the picture, blew the photograph up, and put it on the wall without the giant.
Now, you said a very interesting thing just a minute ago. That was never supposed to be found.
Right.
You said that.
Right.
Why was it never supposed to be found?
It goes, and this is what's important about the whole series, On the Trail of a Nephilim. What we're uncovering is a whole different set of circumstances, a whole different history, which has been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. And it has to do with the Nephilim, which points back to the validity of 2 things: the supernatural worldview, the biblical worldview, and also in this country, Native Americans believe that giants were here. So it validates their stories. More importantly than that, and that's very important, but more importantly than that, it ties back into a supernatural worldview, which Christians believe in. And of course, the Darwinists don't believe in that. I was actually at one mound here in Oklahoma talking to the resident archaeologist, and after 45 minutes going back and forth, I just finally looked at him and I said, "You're a Darwinist, aren't you?" And he said, "Well, yes." And I go, "So you really don't believe in the supernatural at all? And in your paradigm, there's no room for the supernatural. As a Christian, the whole Bible, take the supernatural out of the Bible, what's left, for crying out loud?" So we're on the quest, we're on the trail of a Nephilim, and our mission statement is to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air, which is what we're doing. And the second part of that is to herald the return of the King, Jesus, because we know he's coming back. All the signs are there. And it's interesting how all this, which has been hidden literally for millennia, is now being uncovered step by step.
And the satanic, and I think it's satanically driven, Satan does not want human beings to understand the story behind the story and why.
Right. If Satan has done a masterful job at deliberately obfuscating Genesis 3:15 and negating the whole idea of a seed war. Well, angels don't procreate. Well, it's the Sethite theory. The godly line of Seth and the hoochie mamas of Cain got together. But that's not what the text says, for crying out loud.
That's right.
And that's torturing the text, as my late mentor, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, would say. So we're looking at something, but the mathematical mysteries, and we actually sat down with a math professor and showed her photos of the Octagon Mound. And she was taken aback. She looked at it and she just went, oh my gosh, what are we looking at here? First of all, the Octagon Mound it's an irregular octagon, which means it's not 8 equal sides.
It's on, and when you see this thing from the
From
air,
the air.
by the way, you will see it.
Yeah, from the air.
From the air. When you look at this octagon, and I know a little something about geometry, this my first thought is, how do you
do this?
You can't do that.
And the mounds, the Octagon Mound, each mound is about 4 feet high. It's perfect. It's perfect. And when you're in the Octagon Mound, and I've been lucky enough to be there and in it and fly the drone and talk with Fritz Zimmerman about it and the whole deal.
By the way, I just have to interrupt. Marzulli has this marvelous drone. I mean, it's not
Thank you.
It's not one that he bought at the corner drugstore. This is a drone.
It really shoots in 4K and it's great.
It takes incredible pictures.
The only way you can see it is from the air. When you're down in the Octagon Mound and you're looking at, I know it's an octagon, but if I didn't know what I was looking at, I'd go, well, I know it's some sort of a geometric figure, but I'm really not sure what it is.
Yeah.
But you fly the drone 800 feet, the thing pops in.
Right.
And because it's unequal, we are looking, and this is where the whole narrative, in my opinion, from mainstream archaeologists, the Smithsonian Institute, the academics, the scientific community say, well, you're pointing fingers and you're saying that all these people are crazy and wrong. Look at the evidence for yourself. There's advanced geometry. There's trigonometry employed. They didn't have this 2,000 years ago. The Western world discovered trigonometry about 2,000 years ago.
And I was impressed by the way you covered this, and I have to interject that at my first experience at college was as a trainee engineer. I was going to be an engineer, aeronautical engineer, and guess what we studied? We studied plane and solid geometry, we studied trigonometry, and then from there on up. And I say all this to say that the mathematics professor that you have in your DVD really just challenged me to think about all of the measurements, not just measurements, precise angles.
Absolutely precise.
And not just angles, but you have to divide angles in two and multiply that and put it somewhere else to make this other thing over here fit. And so somebody with really high mathematical knowledge put this thing together.
Not only that, but you've got the surveying problem. How do you lay this out? In other words, in order to lay it out, you've got to draw it first. So what are we drawing on? Buckskin, which okay, I'll see that point. You could draw on a deer skin, but you need a compass and a straight edge.
Yes.
And they don't have those tools. And if it's one thing to do a small octagon or you're drawing on a piece of paper, it's another thing to make something that you could fit the base of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. That's how big this thing is. Inside that Octagon Mound.
Yeah. It
It is that ginormous. It is huge.
Well, you've got me going. I'll have to say this. I've been on the trail of the Nephilim with LA for many, many years. Very enjoyable. And you never fail to move us to the next step. And I can see where you're going now, because there is an unbelievably huge conspiracy that is trying to keep this information away from the public. Why? Because whoever's behind this doesn't want human beings to understand that there is a supernatural background to human history. Keep them dumbed down.
That's right.
And they will not want to seek a remedy for the evil that's on the face of planet Earth. And the remedy, of course, is saving faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And believe me, once you're aware of this great evil, you are motivated to move in the direction of our Lord.
that is the ultimate end game with all this, with this whole series. In fact, the third episode, which I'm editing, and it deals with the supernatural and voices from another realm. What we uncovered there, what we discovered, what we show in the film is astounding. There was one pastor who pastored in Newark, Ohio. He's a Lutheran pastor. He's not equipped to deal with what he finds himself dealing with. We're talking something, right? I'll just tease you a little bit. This is the third episode, which will be probably available at the end of May, early June.
Can't wait.
He is called into a home that is built on one of these mounds. And at one point they walk in and the table is levitating off the floor. And he sees it. And he's not prepared or equipped to deal with this, but he deals with it. And how does he deal with it? By evoking the name of Jesus, because he knows that this is obviously demonic and it's evil. And so he basically performs a deliverance, if you will, on the property, and they've never had problems since. But what we're trying to show in the film, that something very dark, very mysterious, I would even go as far as to say evil, is behind all this.
In the minute or two we have here, there's one element in this DVD that I'd like you to talk about, because there was a museum built into the base of one of these mounds at one time.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a picture found.
Yeah, there was.
Tell us about that.
This is great. This is called Graves Creek Mounds in West Virginia. I've been there like 2 or 3 times. Fritz had been there the same thing, same number of times, and there's a museum there. Well, back in antiquity, when they look at this thing, they tunneled into the mound. And the dirt was compacted so tight that they realized they didn't need to shore it up.
Really?
Yeah, that's a matter of historic record. And allegedly, there were giant skeletons there. So according to what we've read, that the skeletons were on display. So the last time we were at Graves Creek Mound, we were filming there, we flew a drone over, it's got some spectacular shots. And this is in Adena Mound. The sides are so steep. Mm-hmm. You know, could I walk up the sides? Yeah, I could, but I would need like an ice pick in front of me, or an ice axe rather.
You don't want to roll backwards.
And you don't want to roll backwards. I mean, they are really, really steep.
Right.
Really steep. When we show this in the film, Fritz is at the bottom and I'm angling down to him so you get some idea just how steep this is. So we're talking to the resident archaeologist and we're saying, you know, we heard about giant skeletons that were here. Oh no, those were constructs. That was never, we don't know, I don't know anything about that. We never, they weren't here, that type of thing. So we walk out and we're getting ready to go to the mound, and Fritz looks at this little display that's on this, like, just a little display case type of thing with lithographs, photographs from magazines. And lo and behold, we find a lithograph from the 19th century, which shows people inside this old museum that was carved into the ground. It's no longer there. And in that lithograph shows a giant skeleton, plain as day. I doubt it's there now.
Oops.
Yeah, whoops, it's not supposed to be there.
Not supposed to be there. Somebody doesn't want it to be there.
Somebody doesn't want it. Yeah.
Why would there be a conspiracy to wipe out all traces and tracks of the giants, including your experience out in Catalina?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Darwinian paradigm is sacrosanct in the scientific community and academia. And anything that points back to the validity of the supernatural, we can't have that, because now we open up that can of worms, which, well, what do you do with your sin? Well, what are we doing really on this planet? Is the Bible true? What about the prophetic thread that goes from Genesis to Revelation? It just opens up this whole area that these people don't want to travel in. And yet as Christians, we travel in it all the time. I find it fascinating, which is why we're on the trail. I mean, I can't wait. We're going to some undisclosed locations. We'll be gone for 3 weeks. It's over the pond, though. I'll give you that much. It's overseas.
Now, don't give it away.
There you go.
We don't want to do that. We want you to come back and tell us about it.
And I'd be more than happy
And
to.
by the way, let me just say that L.A. and his wife, Peggy, do a lot of traveling. And they have a mission to complete. And I would invite you to put them on your prayer list. If you're out there and you believe in prayer, don't forget to pray for L.A. Marzulli in his travels, for traveling safety, traveling mercy. I'm sure he would appreciate that.
Amen to that.
Now, on the trail of the Nephilim, mathematical mysteries of the Moundbuilders. You want to see everything. in beautiful, sharp, crisp definition. It's right here. You can visit the Mounds and in the comfort of your own living room and see everything LA has been talking about, plus a lot more. $20 for the mathematical mysteries of the Mound Builders. And you'll find it at prophecywatchers.tv, the online bookstore. Scroll down and you will find it there. We also have the preceding work that we've talked about
Episode
before.
1.
Episode 1, The Mysterious Mound Builders. So each of these is $20. If you don't have them, I would recommend that you get them. And as we do here at Prophecy Watchers, we put things in packages. Because here's something you should be reading as well. Cosmic Codes by Dr. Chuck Missler. The late Chuck Missler was just amazing in the insights that he had. And so many of them are in this book. And we're offering for your gift of $60, free shipping anywhere in the United States, both of LA's latest Mound Builders DVDs, plus Chuck Missler's Cosmic Codes. And I think that's a great, great value for you. Now, that leaves us with a couple of minutes to conclude. You know, I'm really excited by the work you're doing because I think you're just on the verge of popping something open that will change the parameters of our modern world.
I'll tease you a little bit. We have an archaeological site in an undisclosed location.
There's always the undisclosed location.
And it is a giant mound that's never been excavated, and it's on private property. Okay. And the owner has given us a verbal okay to go and begin excavations. We have a team of people. We are on the trail, and it's a very large mound. Fritz Zimmerman believes, as I do, that it's a burial site. So we're on it. We're on the trail, and of course we work with archaeologists. Mondo Gonzalez, Rick Woodward, part of the team. So we've got, and of course Chief Joseph Riverwind acts as a liaison between us and any Native Americans who will want to stop us from desecrating the mound. And we're not desecrating. We don't remove anything. If we find a burial, we'll uncover the burial, take DNA, lots of photographs, lots of measurements, but we leave everything intact. So that's our plan. That's how we operate. So, I mean, we're also going across the pond. We've got hours and hours and hours of footage, which is episode 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, literally, on the storyboard, ready to go. So we're trying to get out 3 or 4 a year.
We are at the end of the age of the church. Things are opening up so rapidly, and I think this could be a great witness for those who have not yet received Christ. If LA could show people what's really behind those secret doors, there could be a revolution sweeping this country in belief.
What it will do is it will point back to the validity of a supernatural worldview, which is what the Bible is all about. We live in a supernatural world.
Thanks for being here, and keep it up, LA.
Thank you, Gary.
I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.